Hello everybody, this is Manuez and welcome to another Eternal Top Decks video series. Today it's time to record the very first deck tech with the new cards from the Tale of Horus Trevor, and I figured what better to bring you first than both finally an update to Armory since the nerfs a while ago to Armory, as well as the latest, at least temporary, rank 1 deck after the new campaign dropped. So my buddy and teammate Buckwheat made rank 1, I think the day after the campaign dropped, with a list similar to this. I just made a couple of minor changes that I disagreed with on his list and that I think make the deck a bit better, but mostly I agree with the list he played, and he definitely deserves credit for some of the inspiration of this list. Alright, so let's go over the list. We still have mostly the typical 4-offs, 4 Torch, 4 Quarry, 4 Artisan, 4 Sword of Icaria, 4 Statuary Maiden, and 4 Harsh Rule, and of course 4 Seek Power, but they are part of the power base, so talk about that later. In addition, instead of the usual Roland's favor, we have Privilege of Rank here, both because it helps us fix our Icaria and generally have a bit safer power base, and like that alone would probably not be good enough because Roland's favor has nice synergy with the weapons and is cheaper since the deck doesn't always have anything to do on turn 2, but much more to do on turns, much more often needs to do something on turn 3, especially on the draw. But the other thing is, if you attack with Tavrod and reveal Privilege and mill it, you get to play it, so it makes Tavrod's ability even generate even more value and makes it more powerful. So that's a nice bonus, and that between the facts that I mentioned before and that it is for free when we mill it with Tavrod, makes it really nice. That's one of the ideas that Buckwheat came up with. He implemented it, and I like it. Then we have a typical removal suit of a couple of hard removal. I went with a little more than usual, 2 Vanquish and 3 Slay. Might be possible that 3 Vanquish and 2 Slay is a bit better because of the cost difference, and you mostly want to kill stuff that you can Vanquish anyway with Armory. So Slay is often just a 3 cost Vanquish anyway, but it needs a little more testing. Buckwheat only has 2 and 2. He was running 3 Copper Hull Bailiff, but I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think there's enough matchups on ladder, even as a reaction to this deck, that make you want Copper Hull Bailiff, because it's mostly good against like dedicated token decks and G-Dolis, and both are not popular enough, I think. And it's also just not good enough, I think, with Tavrod, that it's worth running it for Tavrod, because a 7-3 Warcry still trades with everything and doesn't really do a whole lot more than the 2-3 Copper Hull Bailiff does for you most of the time. So I basically cut the 3 bailiffs that he was running, added a 3rd Slay, because having a hard answer to opposing Tavrods is much more important, and with 7 healths the Armory has a hard time dealing with Tavrod with weapons, so that is pretty important, so that's why I like having a 5th removal here. And the other 2 cards that I added were 2 Starsteel Daisho, because for some reason Buckwheat had 0, and I think the card is just, as always, one of the best cards in the deck, and the fact that it matches up poorly against Tavrod doesn't really matter. That's not what it's meant for anyway. We deal with Tavrod with Slay, Vanquish, and Harsh Rule mostly. And flipping this with the Tavrod attack is just so powerful. You can kill a small guy and kill their biggest guy, or hit them for 18 in the face to end the game. it's just game breaking. It's a little worse in this list because there's 0 rise, but then again, instead of 2 rise, we have 4 Tavrod, so they make up pretty well for the rises. I'm not 100% sure if I like the 0 rises. One other change that is a bit unusual for Armory is the 4 Auric Runehammer, but that also makes sense. Given that we have Tavrod, we want a few more weapons to hit with Tavrod, and Runehammer is probably the best weapon hit with Tavrod, because it usually lets you kill 2 big things. And we still have 2 Icaria, something that I'm a bit skeptical of. Buckwheats told me he tried it without Icaria and didn't like it, so he went back to Icaria, but he also didn't have Daisho, so it's possible that with Daisho you can just give up on Icaria and either run like 2 Rise or 2 other cards, but I would probably be inclined to just run 2 Rise, which would be nice because it makes the curve of the deck a little lower and also alleviates some much needed strain on the power base, because Tavrod introduces another influence requirement to the deck of double shadow, so not needing triple fire and triple justice anymore would be greatly appreciated. And if I would cut Icaria or anything else, I would probably give up on the privilege plus Tavrod cuteness and just run to Orlan's favor, because being able to play that on turn 2 into a sort of Icaria is really good against aggressive decks officially on the play. And it's also nice to have at least some life gain now that Warden is gone, and extra armor gain for the Daishos. The other option that I could see is just, even though it's a bit many 5-drops, is to just cut the Icarias for 2 Throne Wardens to still have a fair share of life gain against aggressive decks to stabilize out back. That's basically the only possible future changes I could see. And yeah, then we have the power base. Mostly the same as before. We have 4 fire sigils, 5 justice sigils, 2 shadow sigils now because of Tavrod, the 4 seek power and the 2 privilege, the full 12 seats, and 3 more banners to help with our shadow requirements for our Shadow Splash and Tavrod. 2 Stone Scar banner to help, because most of the cards we play are Stone Scar based, and also because we need a certain amount of justice sigils, like 5 is a comfortable amount for 2 privileges. Otherwise I could see cutting Stone Scar banner for another Argenport banner and swapping a justice sigil for a fire sigil, because it makes Torch a bit better earlier. That's probably what I would do if we would replace this with Orlan's favor. And yeah, this puts us at 17 shadow, 18 justice and 18 fire, plus 2 privilege. So the hardest part is getting the 3 fire usually. And the 17 shadow are a bit iffy and light still for Tavrod. If you've seen Buckwheats' list, his power base was definitely misbuilt. He was running 2 Rakano banners over 2 Seeds of Vengeance, putting your shadow resources at 15, which is barely enough to support all the single shadow cards reliably, especially the Quarry and the Slay early on, let alone the double shadow on turn 5 for Tavrod. And I've yet played against a fair share of people simply blindly copy-pasting his list and sitting there with 5+ power, grip full of cards and on a single shadow, and probably at least 1 Tavrod in hand that they can't play and that would swing the game in their favor while I am winning. So don't make that mistake. Make sure that you support the cards you put in your deck by playing in influence sources of the given color. Alright, that's the deck. My latest take on Armory, with a few prospective future changes, so you can test and modify it a bit more going forward. These deck tags obviously don't come out weekly for each archetype, so gotta give you some tools to hand to adapt it to yourself going forward. Alright, this deck is really strong and the most obvious, easiest strong home for Tavrod so far. Card is really powerful, is gonna definitely to a certain extent define the metagame and define what's playable. If you have no way to either answer Tavrod or ignore Tavrod or win before Tavrod comes down, your deck is probably not going to be playable, or very playable at least. Alright, that's it for the deck tech. Let's hop into some games as usual and see how it does in action. Stay tuned for the first half of the games coming up in a moment.